Okay, welcome everybody to this interview with WAYNE GLEW. I'm Philip J. Watt, and for those who don't know who I am, I'm a hypnosykotherapist, a mediator, independent journalist, and author. And I have been writing a lot over the last 5 years about a few key topics, that which is focused on my sort of profession, which is personal development and philosophical introspection, but also about what has been happening within our social system. How has certain aspects of it been hijacked and manipulated to suit and enrich the interests of big money and big business at the expense of us, the people, and the environment? And what are the potential solutions to resolve these issues? And so this interview is going to speak to that because whilst WAYNE is a leading authority, an Aussie champion when it comes to the Australian Constitution, this stuff is applicable on more of a planetary scale because the Constitution of Australia, like many others, is the rule book that gives the authority for a government to actually exist in the first place. And so what he'll be speaking to is how that the Constitution has been undermined and disrespected by various legislations, such as the Australia Act, as well as the annotated Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia, which is basically an addendum to the Constitution, but he'll explain that better. He's the person with the expertise here. We're going to try and get him to lay it out very clearly and succinctly for you, so that the Australian public can be informed about what the issues actually are. So it's incredibly important that you share this, not just with your Australian friends and family, but also with politicians and bureaucrats and police and military and other people who work within the system, because it's integral that they understand this knowledge and are educated about it as well. So we'll also be looking at what's going on in terms of the 2019 federal election and a pledge that has been developed by the Revive Australia movement, or RAM, which will be sent to every single candidate within the election in the House of Reps and Senate to determine whose side they're on. Are they on the side of the people? Are they going to focus on the core issues that we need to focus on? Or are they going to choose to be on the side of our corrupted institutional design and the way that essentially we have a corporatocracy and not a true democracy in our current day and age? And so I know that's a mouthful, but we'll explain all that. We'll also look at the vote of no confidence strategy, or informal voting, that some people are pushing in Australia. And essentially that means they want to cross out all the candidates and write no suitable candidate to enact my will, or something like that. And the fact that whilst being a noble strategy, it is a foolish strategy because it will not work. Unfortunately, the system has been scammed and it isn't applicable. So lots of good stuff to come in this interview. I really appreciate Wayne spending the time. He's a former police officer. He's been providing a service to the Australian community for a long, long time, and he's been fighting in the courts in Western Australia to show that the Constitution has been disrespected on many, many key levels. So welcome to Dissect Media, Wayne. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you very much. The main object of what I'm doing is I set out at a young age, around 18, to join the police force to serve the people. And that, when I ended up getting in, was when I was 26 years old, because I had an eye injury, had to get over that. So I spent the next 17 years learning that the biggest corrupt system in the country was what was sitting in Parliament and what was sitting in our courts. I've heard them lie, bend, twist things to suit themselves, ignore our Constitution. I was already studying that at a young age. And all the things they were getting us to do, they kept changing the law to make all figures in relation to courts. For instance, I was actually in the court system, and the return to the court was around 60%, and they were saying it was 7 or 8%. The politicians fudge figures to make themselves look good. So when I went back to work in Midland, which I worked a long, long time in Midland, I worked with the kids. I started the Street Rod Club, got all their hot cars in there. We taught them how to modify them lawfully. Instead of putting stickers on their cars, I was giving them a big long list to do on their cars and say, see you in 2 weeks, fix it, you no sticker, don't fix it, you get a sticker. You get a reaction out of the people then. It's called policing. It's called getting the public to do what they should do without hammering the guts out of them, which is the average person wants to do. The police had to learn, and still have to learn, they're there to serve the people, and they aren't. Then I started looking at the Constitution in relation to half the laws we were enforcing. I get it. When somebody's drunk, you've got to pick them up, put them somewhere where they can be safe. That's fine. I've got no problem with that. I was against from the start when they brought in random breath tests, because if you don't see anybody committing offence, what right have you got to prevent their normal right of travel on the roads? They have it under Section 92 of the Constitution, a right of travel. No one can interrupt that unless they see you commit an offence. You can't just say, well, you're driving down the road, therefore you're committing an offence, I can pull you over. And you say, blow in this. If you don't blow in it, you get charged with drink driving. Hang on. What about if I've never drunk in my life? Too bad. I'm saying, basically, a police officer is saying, you're drunk. Blow in this and prove you're sober. Nonsense. The onus of proof is on them. Are you staggering? Does your breath smell of liquor? Not alcohol. You can't smell alcohol. Does it smell of liquor? What right did you have to stop me? I wasn't doing anything wrong. My kids are waiting at home. My wife's waiting at home. Why should I sit here talking to you, doing what you want, so you can write a figure on a bit of paper? It comes down with, are you going to abide by the laws? Yeah, or are you not? If you drink too much, you want them over the road, pull them over, book them. That's legitimate. If you see them driving down the road normal, pulling everybody off into these big long lines, nonsense. Get rid of that rubbish. That's deprivation of liberty. That's your time. It's not theirs. Now, you get on to everything else the government's doing. Next, they get into your land titles and they change them to Torrens titles. You have a certificate of title to your land. I do. That's what knocked out my case on the 20th. The council will tell you, and it's all over the news, the council won, the council won. No, they didn't. The magistrate had no authority to deal with land that had a lawful title. Their act says so. He had no authority to deal with land over 75,000. Their act says so. They were the first two issues. I proved in the court, day after day, on the 4 days, he hadn't sworn the lawful oath of allegiance. That proved he was sitting in treason. I told him he was sitting in treason. I told him he was a traitor. Those words meant he couldn't sit in the court under Section 44 of the Constitution. I'm an officer of the Crown. I've accused him of treason. He's attainted of treason until such time it goes before a court. I don't have to put him before a court. That's up to the federal police. They won't do it. Tough. He sits in treason until it's fixed. I then said to him on the last day, here is our Constitution, the annotated version, quick and Garran. It has all the text, the public records, and the Hansard of how the whole Constitution came together. Its concept, what it means, what laws they used, what decisions of overseas court that put our Constitution together in a sensible document that could be used for normal, free, everyday living. The next one they produced after 1999, a fraudulent one, a green one. That green one takes the people from being sovereign and supreme and gives all of that to the government. How does that work? How do you do that when the preamble to the Constitution says, humbly relying on the blessing of Almighty God, we the people of New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, Tasmania, South Australia and Western Australia joined together in one indissoluble federation of the Commonwealth of Australia. We the people, not we the government. We the government don't exist. At the state level, we have an executive, which is the governor. He selects 10 from the lower house, 8 from the upper house. He takes them into a council, an executive council. Now, they put together the legislation. The governor appoints all justices of the peace. They must be officers of the Crown. He appoints the Attorney General. He has to be a legal practitioner of more than 5 years, but not a lawyer. This is imperial law, which is law in this country under the Act of Settlement, the Colonial Laws Validity Act, and Magna Carta, habeas corpus, and all those laws. Now, then we have the legislature. If you look at page 791 of our Constitution, it says, neither the federal nor the state parliament are sovereign bodies. They are simply legislatures with limited authority. If they attempt to pass a law in excess of that authority, the law is a nullity and affords no obedience. What that means is they are there to debate and pass legislation put together by the Executive Council. By the way, that Executive Council, under section 62 to 68 of the Commonwealth Constitution, holds all the portfolios. They can then sit in Parliament still, an everyday thing. They can do advice, but they cannot vote. They're deemed to be biased towards their portfolios. The Constitution states that. Now, when you look at it from that point of view, once both houses have debated and passed legislation, it goes back to the governor. The governor looks at it. It complies with our Constitution. He signs on behalf of the Crown. That law then binds the Crown to a law made pursuant to the Constitution, which is an agreement in law with the Crown. Now, the same thing happens at federal level. The difference at federal level is the Governor-General is the highest authority in government in Australia. It is his job to check on the Parliament, how the military is run. It's all under his control, not under the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is very, very simply the foreman of the federal Parliament. Now, we've got representatives. We have all these politicians sitting there. They're there to represent us. That is the House of Representatives. That is the lower house of the federal Parliament. If they're representing us, what have we got an opposition for? Are they opposing us, or are they opposing what is actual fact? The House of Representatives is full of Liberal, Labor, National, Greens, depending who's in. They're opposing their ideas. Hang on, you're representing us. Why have we got your ideas in our Parliament? Why have we got an opposition trying to force their ideas onto our representatives? And then you've got the Senate, which sits above that, which is the High Court of the Parliament. Why aren't they pulling them in check? Why do they have an opposition there? Why have we got all these extra members of Parliament? When you go to your Constitution, it states, 61 I think it is, the governor of the state selects a pool of people to be elected into Parliament. From that pool, we the people go in there, get one piece of paper, we write the person's name on there, we put our name on top because you have to be approved elector. So you put your name on top. This is in every state constitution I'm talking about. And that person, you select 6 over the whole state. They fill our position in the House of Representatives. By referendum, we increase that to 10. That's fine. We can do that. Now, all right, now you've got 6 states. 12 sixes are 72. Why have we got 76 senators? And why, when a quorum is a quarter of that? Why have we only got 6 or 7 sitting in Parliament, the rest bludgeon, going off, doing whatever they like, and then making decisions? How are those decisions made? That's crooked. That's criminal. Why aren't they there? Why aren't they called to order by the Secretary of the Senate? Why hasn't that happened? Because we have a pack of crooks sitting there. That's all we got.
Wayne, you mentioned the Green Book, so I just want you to elaborate on that. Is that referring to the Australia Act or to something else? And whilst we're at it, I know there's sections within the Constitution that talk about, that basically say, until Parliament otherwise provides. Is that how they've able to manipulate and undermine the Constitution?
No, what they're using is section 51, subsection 38. And that says, with the conferral of the parliaments of state, the Commonwealth Parliament can exercise authorities it had at Federation. Now, if you look in the annotated one, Quick and Garran, ours, not this latest piece of garbage, the Green Book, I keep referring to it as, it states, on the proclamation of the Constitution, on the 9th of July 1900, the old entities known as the Australasian Council and the colonies ceased to exist. And that is under the provisions of Clause 7 to the Constitution, both the Constitution Act 1900 UK and our Constitution. Now, in Quick and Garran, it said there was no authorities transferred over from the colonies to the states. But even if that wasn't so, there was only 7 legislative areas ever exercisable by the Australasian Council and even less by the colonies, and all 7 are contained in section 51 of the Constitution. Now, in relation to local government, I've always said, where in section 51 of the Constitution does it authorise another set of government outside the 3 sets set up by the Constitution in section 70, being the executive, the legislation, and the judicature, which is your thing. And it distinctly gives a separation of powers across there. Now, they are saying, oh, yeah, until the Parliament otherwise provides. All right, I'll answer that one simply. Any way the Parliament provides something is when the governor and all the executive canvass the people, and all the politicians do, and they get the ideals of the people, and they want to change slightly things in the Constitution. Now, that's altering it. Now, these people are saying, oh, no, the Parliament can put their heads together, come back, and just remove what they like and change what they like. And they've been doing it. And that's where they come up with this book, their version of our Constitution. It is just nothing but nonsense. When you read it, it creates the Parliament as sovereign when it's not. It can't be. If you've got a governor and an executive council putting legislation together, and you've got an executive government that says, get lost, we'll do what we like, because we're a political party, then we've got anarchy inside our Parliament. And we've got it big time. When you read it, it creates the Parliament as sovereign when it's not. It can't be. If you've got a governor and an executive council putting legislation together, and you've got an executive government that says, get lost, we'll do what we like, because we're a political party, then we've got anarchy inside our Parliament. And we've got it big time. It's very difficult for people to perceive that we've been lied to and misled and deceived using section 51, subsection 38 of the Constitution. But then when you look at the Australia Act, this is a Green Book, isn't it? The Australia Act was actually passed through Parliament in March or April 1985. And it was signed off by Sir Ninian Stevens, the Governor General at the time. This can be checked out, it's all accurate. Towards the end of the year, all the states put in their request acts. So how did they use section 51, subsection 38 of the Constitution, which says with the conferral of the states, because they'd passed it before they even got a request act off the states? That's where they first started messing up and lying to the people. Then you've got to look at the Constitution and section 5 of the Australia Act itself. Section 5 says this act must comply with the Constitution and the Commonwealth Constitution Act. Now, if it does, where in the Constitution did we, who own the Constitution, give the government the authority to rise up as a legislature, passing laws for a good government of us, to raising up above us and passing laws over us and controlling us? That is a complete reversal. That is treason. You've breached the oath of allegiance to serve us and assist us, which is what your oath is, to being dictatorial. Now, if it does, where in the Constitution did we, who own the Constitution, give the government the authority to rise up as a legislature, passing laws for a good government of us, to raising up above us and passing laws over us and controlling us. That is a complete reversal. That is treason. You breach the oath of allegiance to serve us and assist us, which is what your oath is, to being dictatorial. Now, when they first tried the local government on in 1974, we said no. 1979, they added it with an Act of Parliament. In Western Australia, it's Act number 88 of 1979. I remember it distinctly. We still said no. So what? Why did we get it? They used the same section, Section 51, subsection 38. The State sent a request act. The federal government passed it. They put it in all the state constitutions. Then they went to 1988 and they had a constitutional convention, which most people don't know anything about. In there, all the people being off Whitlam and all the professors and everything else decided we were going to have a republic. They admitted in there that Australia, since 1973 with the Unidroit Treaty, was so out of whack with all the law, and all the laws were so unlawful, that they needed to have a republic to clean up the mess. So they put it to the people. But before the 1999 referendum, they got a request act from the states to pass it anyway, regardless of what we said or did. Now, most people haven't even bothered to check if that's there. Well, a referendum, we say no, means no. It's got to be that way. But what they didn't realise with that referendum, that was all not only to get rid of the Queen and give us a republic with an Australian head of state, which we got anyway. What they did with it is they wanted to install COAG and all their system they got in place, and we were just going to be like sheeple and sign off on it, and everything was going to be happy and hunky-dory. The big problem was we said no. We said no to the lot. But inside COAG is local government. It's got all the state parliaments and local government. That was the third referendum, which means they can't have any more referendums in relation to local government. That's why the courts are now used to enforce local government, even though they know it's not lawful. And people keep coming on and saying, oh, you don't know what you're talking about, especially Tim Prater in Queensland, a few people like that. I just ignore them because at the end of the day, we said no. Why did we say no? Because we were asked. If we had no authority to answer, why did they ask us? Because simply 106 of the Constitution allows the state constitution to continue subject to the Commonwealth one. In other words, the Commonwealth one is the superior law. The state one, if it's changed in any way, altered or anything else, not to conform with the Commonwealth one, it's invalid. So when they added number 88 in 1979, or in every other state, they did it at the same time, local government to the state constitution, they negated the state constitutions. They also knocked out the state parliaments because they're repugnant. Now, when you look at that imperial law, it's 1688 Bill of Rights. Enclosed in there is a statute of monopolies, Transfer of Land Act, statute of monopolies, the right for magistrates to exist as stipendiary magistrates, statute of monopolies, right for police to exist, statute of monopolies, the right for justice of the peace to be established, statute of monopolies. All your lower courts, they call magistrates court, are actually courts of petty sessions. They were when I joined the police force, established statute of monopolies, all imperial law. Judges, imperial law. Police have to be selected by the governor of the state. They are independent law enforcement officers employed by the states they're in. They're not now. They're pretty well Gestapo who kick the crap out of anybody who objects to them. And that's the problem we've got. Now, they're under the direct control of the governor by law, by letters patent. 6.1.9 of the statute of monopoly says only the monarch can change the letters patent. She hasn't, it stands. That's the end of it. Now, the police are there to assist the governor to control the parliament. When the parliament gets out of line, the governor says arrest them, put them in the can, front up, they will be charged. That's the job of the police, primary. Secondary is to keep the peace throughout the state. They've turned it round. The government's got control. They use them as the Gestapo army over us. This is the big problem we got. They've turned it round. The government's got control. They use them as the Gestapo army over us. This is the big problem we got. I know I'm covering a large area of different subjects, and anytime you can come back to them and I will explain them in detail. The big problem is this same section of the Constitution. No one's ever looked at it. I had to go right back to 1907 when William Hughes, he was one of the 8 Labor people who were actually in our parliament at that time, and he became the Prime Minister. He tried to knock out the statute of monopolies with the referendum in 1907. He tried again in 1913. We said, no, get lost, we're keeping it. We had to, because it was part of imperial law. Now, he introduced conscription. That's unlawful. Only the governor, on the advice of the Queen, can engage our troops to defend our country. Take them outside has to be a directive from the Queen. It's her army, her navy, her air force. Now, when you go from there, they also, Billy Hughes introduced in 1907 preferential voting. Now, it was a minor thing, and this was to assist the people. Nonsense. It was to bit, by stealth, feed into our system the method of breaking down our Constitution, Section 51, subsection 38. Now, in their little green book, they've changed all that, so there is no, it was still colonies ceased one day and the states started the next. Go back to HCA 48 in 1996. No, they didn't. The states were created in 1901 under the provisions of 107, 108, and 109 of the Constitution, and draw their authority referentially from that Constitution, our Commonwealth Constitution. In other words, after Federation, it wouldn't matter if they had residual powers, reserve powers, or anything else. Every single law passed in the state of Western Australia or any other state must comply with the Commonwealth Constitution and the authority granted. There is no outside powers. There is no residual powers coming across that gap that are applicable unless they comply with the Constitution. Now, I actually did a lot of research and went back to 1915, HCA 39 in 1915. So Samuel Griffiths, one of the people who put the Constitution together, said quite clearly, here we find at paragraph 148, that is, here we find 106 binds the state constitution and all laws passed pursuant to it to the overriding authority of the Commonwealth Constitution. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to realise, hang on, all state laws when passed must comply with the Commonwealth Constitution. Local government wasn't in the state constitution. Who gave you the right to pass a law? It didn't fit with the Commonwealth one. You knew that. You've had 3 referendums. We said no, we still don't want it. It's a blight on society. They're controlling our land and controlling us.
Yeah, I will jump in there, Wayne. You've covered a lot, and there's heaps that I would like to respond to. I won't get to all of it. I certainly want to get to preferential voting because it is part of the 1-2 punch of bringing the power back to the people. We need to enforce preferential voting so that instead of our vote likely to go to a candidate we don't want it to go to, it stays with one of the candidates that we want it to go to. It's called trickle-down voting, forced preferential voting, and it's not good for Australians whatsoever. I will get to that though later. Now, I just want to talk quickly about these echo chambers and the indoctrination of the population, because what you're talking about, the majority of people don't understand. I'm only over the last few years starting to become conscious of it. Most people are over the last sort of 5-10 years. It's where the real groundswell has started to happen. Of course, there's been many people aware of it for many decades, and my hat's off to them for keeping up the good fight. However, there are so many Australians who don't get this, including politicians, including bureaucrats, including police, including military, including people who work within the system. And I'd like to sort of get your view on how widespread that is. So, look, of course, some of the higher tier politicians and their corporate masters, the corporatocracy, the shadow government, deep state, whatever you want to call it, there are big money players behind the scenes that do control macro policy. That's a real big issue with a two-party system, otherwise known as a two-party tyranny. And so that would understand this stuff. But a lot of these lower and middle tier politicians, they don't get it because they've just been indoctrinated into this sick and twisted system just like the rest of us. So they've got a genuine or an authentic ambition to provide a service for their community and represent their community, but they don't realize what they're going in for. They don't realize that working for one of the two major parties, including Greens, is not in what's in the benefit of Australians, for our children, our environment, and our future generations. And so we need to start helping people to understand all of this stuff and spread the information, spread the education, so that people in the system can actually stand up for it. So, how do you feel about what's going on in terms of public consciousness about all this stuff? Not just people outside of the system, but also those within the system.
Yeah, I've looked at everything you said because, and I said in the Kalgoorlie court in front of Justice Stephen Scott, he mouthed off about me being vexatious, and I stood up as a friend of the court, got in his face. Eventually, he allowed me to speak for 1 hour and 40 minutes from the bar table on the authenticity of the court. Now, I don't go around bragging this. My whole object was to explain exactly the authenticity of the court. It didn't have any. He wasn't aware of it. At the end of my talking to him, the state solicitor sitting next to me said, "I wish I had your brain." I said, "You can have it. I'll dish it up to you now. You need my memory, not my brain. You need my understanding, not what I think. This is not me." And then the judge said, "I guess you'll be coming to my hanging." I said, "I wouldn't hang you. What a waste of life." I said, "I might put you down in Macquarie Island for a few years to freeze to death until you learn to behave yourself. But I've learned through the years. The police don't know. The lawyers do. Magistrates don't. Judges don't. Politicians don't. The majority of politicians wouldn't have a clue. Exclude the top end of them because, yeah, they do. But most of the other politicians, they join. They've got all these ideas of grandeur. We're going to make a difference. And they want to. But the problem is they've got these advisors. Some of these advisors are so bent and twisted and crooked, they wouldn't know. Well, I think they know what they're doing is wrong. And I'm quite sure they do. We've got a politician here. He's a lovely guy, lacks a lot of guts, but he's a nice guy. He'll do anything for anybody if he can. But his advisor serves him up like everybody else. The document says, "Oh, sign this. I've read it. It's all approved." And they sign it. We went to Parliament. I had 2 meetings in state Parliament, half one day and half the next, through a friend. And I've got to meet a lot of senators and that through this friend, because I'm trying to convince them to go back under our constitution, go back to our law. After a big meeting a couple of weeks ago down in Albany, they wanted to know how they could swear the oath of allegiance. I said, simply, get it, go before another person and swear that oath, then stick to it. But then you've got to dump your green constitution and all your beliefs of grandeur and come back under our constitution. He wouldn't do it. His ego wouldn't let it. So you're not only are getting false teaching to these blokes, they get their ego up and they don't want to turn because, look, I'll get embarrassed. I've got caught out. I've been caught out a few times myself. I've gone to court. I got in the face of the court. I mouthed off at one of the judges. It cost me 10 grand. I learned to shut my mouth, engage my brain and open my ears, listen to what was said and talk back to them with authority, because we are the sovereign, but with respect. We have to learn. You know, when you see some of the things I've seen in my life, you want to go and kick the crap out of anybody who does the wrong thing and hurts people for no good reason. That mentality has to stop in this country. What has to go forward, you have to treat everybody just like you treat yourself. behave in a way that whatever you do doesn't hurt somebody else. We need to get off our backside, go to our politicians and say, hey, mate, I don't care what your political party says. You're employed to serve us. This is what we need. This is what we've got to come back to fix all the things that you just spoke about. And to do that, it's a big ask. But I always tell all the magistrates, even the magistrate the other day, in his own way, he's a nice enough guy. He thought he'd push his nonsense on me. I don't push. I don't yell anymore. I keep a nice, straight, authoritative voice, got in his face, explained where he was wrong, albeit every day. He tried to put his stuff over. I pushed it back, said, no, it's nonsense. There's a reason why. At the end of the day, I said, here's our constitution. Here's yours. Yours is a bit of crap. You're sitting in treason. That's treachery to overturn the constitution. The last thing I ever want to see is that guy with a good brain go to jail. I'd like to see him get a boot in the butt, put into school, taught the law, and he adheres to the law. That's what I want. I got nothing against him. I don't hate anybody. I love all humans. We're all humans. We've all got a job. I've got a lot of people, Aboriginal friends. I said, we're fighting together. This is our country. I can't control where I was born. I was born here. So I take what I got, do the best, and help everybody. That's how we need to do it. We need to get these politicians. And I agree with you. Cops don't know. I know a lot of cops are real. There's a couple I'd give a lift under the ear. I made a fool of one not long ago, went to his superintendent. I could have had him charged departmentally, and I said, no, I don't. Fix his problem. Put him correct. We got a constitution. He can't say the council can come along, sign a bit of paper and override the constitution. What a stupid statement. Obviously, he didn't know. So I corrected it by going over his head and making him listen. Now, if we all could do that, what a fantastic place this would turn to in a short time. I used to post 150, 148, 150 posts all written. We used to get 200 people read it. Yeah, it was all fact. When I started doing videos, people could then see who they're talking to, and they sit there and talk about it. And this is why I don't care how many million times I come on here or post videos, I will do whatever it takes so that people can live in this country under laws passed for us, not over us, and live harmonious. Because, I mean, who wants to wake up in the middle of the night with someone wanting to belt you up because you said boo over the fence to his dog? A lot of nonsense. Why can't we say, oh, your dog's a bit noisy, mate. Yeah, right, give it a clip under the ear and it behaves. That is doing it sensibly. Why do we have to fight and argue? It's stupid.
Yeah, well, you've hit the nail on the head there, Wayne. I did a video just recently over the last few days on the forks in the road that we're facing, the internal questions that we've got, and a big focus of that, one of the key ones was about honour versus disrespect. How do we honour ourselves? How do we disrespect ourselves? How do we honour ourselves? And how do we translate that in terms of our behaviour towards others? Because look, we're all at our own stage of development, right? We've all been, highly ignorant. We sort of were born ignorant into this world, and we've slowly had to emancipate ourselves from that ignorance, from that deception, from the lies, from the propaganda and the programming, and we're all at our own certain stage through that journey. And that's a never-ending journey, an ongoing journey of sort of becoming more aligned to truth, becoming more coherent in our system, and being more bloody honourable and to ourselves and others. And so we need to respect that people are at their own stage, just like we are. We wouldn't like others that are more advanced in terms of their intelligence and their understanding of what's going on, both metaphysically and materially, to look down on us and speak to us like crap. So we should do the same bloody thing to others who we feel might not have as much of an understanding. But let's not forget that at the same time we could be wrong. Just because we think we're right doesn't mean we're right. I can guarantee right here, right now, we're wrong about stuff right now, just like we have been in the past, and just like we'll continue to be in the future. So if we just open ourselves to that understanding, that journey, and realize that we're all going through this same process, then we're going to get along a lot better. We're going to be able to learn both individually and collective a lot better, and it's going to be just good for our world, plain and simple. Now, just in reference to individual sovereignty. So, look, all law, all legislation. I've been writing about this for a long time. Many people have been the way that we design our man law should be designed on natural law. And one of the fundamental principles of natural law is that the individual has supreme authority over themselves while still being held accountable for doing no harm unless in self defense. That is such an integral philosophy and doctrine and law within this human experience, and any legislation, any so-called rules that police officers need to enforce and that these parliamentarians create, if it's undermining our natural right to have supreme authority over ourselves, then it's not real law. It needs to be tossed out immediately. Look, we really need to understand, as I mentioned at the start, that we're in a fork in the road here. We could either go further into this centralized control system, that totalitarianism that I spoke about before, or as an individual, we can emancipate ourselves and move into decentralization and localization and caring for yourself, for each other, empowering yourself, educating yourself, but also encouraging us to do it on a collective level as well. We really need to bind together to move in that direction, because once again, we are choosing the direction we're heading on because the people have the ultimate power. I cannot emphasize that enough. Just because we're ignorant, we've been indoctrinated, it's no excuse. We, if we so choose, can wake up and move in the right direction. We're not heading in the right direction right now. We need to make sure that we were heading in such a great direction for hundreds of years. We have slowly built up civilization and in some pretty good ways, and not some great ways as well. But we've been moving in a pretty good direction, except for the last sort of 100 years. We've started to slow down and go backwards. And so we've got a golden opportunity right now to be emancipate ourselves from debt slavery and ideological slavery. Absolutely. We have the greatest opportunity to be truly free, like hardly ever in our so-called civilized history. However, we have structural ignorance, structural violence, structural sickness within our system. That's why so many people are either stressed, sad, or sick. They're suffering from a collective existential crisis on some very key levels. It's very sad to see many people in despair, and it doesn't need to be that way. But unfortunately, the system has been designed in a way where it's inherent. There are going to be people, a lot of people, who are going to be subject to that. But on an individual level, we can emancipate ourselves, and on a collective level, we can remove this structural sickness, remove the structural ignorance, and design a social system that goes down this path, which is going to be the right direction, the direction that we all feel we should be heading on, and some of us think we're heading on. We can choose that if we bind together. Now, and that includes being intelligent with this 2019 election. It is so vital, so vital that we elect really good people in the last federal election. I think it was around 25% of Australians didn't vote for the major parties. We need to increase that to 30%, 35%, 40%, maybe even 50% of Australians can start to get to know who their candidates are and vote for them if they're going to align to the core issues that we've got, which will be identified within the pledge that I'll talk about soon. Now, just a quick note on the kids and the adults, the people who are causing disruption and dysfunction within our communities. Now, we've got to have empathy for a lot of them. Yes, they've got the responsibility to deal with the consequences, both karmic and lawful consequences from their actions. However, many of these people have been treated like absolute crap as children. They've been traumatized. They've gotten a real bad deal, had a real bad start to life. Their neurology is all messed up. They're not really they're sick on a very core level, and we need to, instead of wanting to punish them and just put them away in a bloody cell or whatever and forget about them. What we need to be doing is helping them. We need to help them heal. We need to help them grow. We need to give them the right community love and the right conditions for them to actually go through that healing and growth process so that they can become functional, productive members of our community that contribute and participate in good ways. So people can be reformed. I've seen it. I've worked in the system myself. I've seen how people can be rehabilitated. They need to want to do it, yes, but there needs to be the mechanisms set up. One great example that I love to tell the story. It's like a metaphor. I don't know if it's actually true, but I love it. There's a story of an old tribe, and that tribe, what the mother used to do before they conceived the baby, she'd go out into the bush or the forest. She'd listen for the song of her child, the child that is yet to be conceived. She'd learn the song. She'd go back, conceive the child, sing the song to the child whilst in the belly, and the community would learn the song of the child. When the child was born, the child would learn its song, and then if it was ever to go against the general societal values, the laws of the tribe or whatnot, then instead of punishing and rejecting and like you're out of here, what they used to do is sing the song and welcome the child or the adult back into the tribe, because that's what we all really want at our core, is just to be loved, just to be respected, and just to be a part of a community, and feel like you've got like a role and a piece to play in the orchestra of that community. So we need to think about that as a general philosophy for how we help to re-assimilate anybody within our communities that are struggling to look after themselves and to give to the community in healthy, fair bloody ways, right? So look, I know that was a bit of a spiel, rant over. Next question: what are we going to do? How do you think we can restore the Constitution, Wayne? What's the next steps for us?
Well, my thoughts is to teach it. There's a group now want me to travel around teaching it, and I've actually do it now, but not very often. People take videos and they put them out. That I find the biggest hassle we've got is it's Joe Blow off the street, and Joe Blow off the street doesn't have much money, and I do everything I can for the cost. So I drive from here to Perth. That doesn't cost them. It costs me for a plane fare to Melbourne, say. I get put up in a house there. The people are lovely. I went to lecture for 3 hours one night, and it was 7 hours at 1:30 in the morning when we went home. Those people were hungry. I wanted to teach them. Then we found out the video equipment packed up. We need a group, which we're getting together now, who will put out there. But I can't be the only one. I've got to teach these people and get them to a stage where they can learn our Constitution. We have a good group, and it's made up of all individual people. No one has any say in anything. One puts the bill to get 26 constitutions produced at a time. I get my next shipment tomorrow or Monday. I'm not sure when they get here. And we were selling one or two every 3 or 4 months. We're now selling 26 as soon as they come in. In fact, we've got 26 coming in. We've got, I think, 11 or 12 sold already. We sell them for $150. They cost us exactly $150. We add freight to that. That way it breaks even. We actually make not one red cent. The guy who finances up front from his business. He gets paid exactly what we give him back, which is $150 per book. We need more people to do it. And need someone in other states like Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia, Victoria, Tasmania. Go to a printer, take one of our books like we did. We bought one, put it in there, strip it down, produce it, because it's ours. We can. There's no copyright. Excuse me. Copyright in the green one, but there's no copyright on us taking our Constitution and producing it. When people get it, they start to read it. Then I can do seminars both by video. I'm not an expert. I'm still learning in a lot of areas. A lot of people, like the judge, try to say, "Oh, you reckon you're an expert, you know everything." That's all nonsense. No one is an expert in anything. We all reach a certain level. I mean, even in your job, you reach a certain level, and then you go on from there because you want to learn. A lot of people say, "Well, you're an expert." Yeah, you are, because you put your knowledge into someone else's head who doesn't have that level. That makes you an expert. Also makes you a good teacher. We need to say, "We're nothing. Come along, sit down. I'll explain it. If you've got a different version, tell me. Look at the book. If you're wrong, correct it. If they're wrong, correct them. But do it in a manner that they want to learn." And that's what I've been endeavouring to do. I get a lot of knockers that just forget them. They're donkeys. Anybody who doesn't read the Constitution, doesn't understand it, you're a donkey. Because why quote something you have no idea? I get it. "Oh, we got residual powers." Yeah, right, I can explain it. But they don't want to listen. What you said earlier is 100% correct. We need to get these kids, sit them down. I used to get them coming out of Longmore, go and see them the next day and take them out, get them a job in the brickyards or whatever. Those kids, when I got in a brawl in Swan View once, two of us against about 20 odd blokes from out of town, those kids jumped in and flogged a lot of them. We didn't have to touch them because we give to those kids proper policing. Those kids gave to us respect for what we did. Now, and that fits perfectly with what you're saying. We need to, I'm the second eldest of 14 kids. There's over 400 of us in the immediate family with all the kids because we're good breeders. I've got 8 kids, 4 girls and 4 boys, and 10 grandkids, and they're expanding. Good, that's brilliant. I want to see them grow up in a decent country where they can go out and buy their little bit of land, get a certificate of title that says they own it. Whatever they do inside that fence, as long as it doesn't hurt the neighbour, let them go. Who cares if the neighbour paints their house purple? Rewa and all those companies are the problem. Oh, you devalue the property. No, you don't. You devalue your own property. But if you want to live in a garage on there and it's got a toilet, a shower, and you sit outside all day, that's your right. You bought that land for that purpose. It doesn't matter where you go or what you do in this country. You should be free to do it your way because you are sovereign, like you said. You are the owner of your own life. How you treat yourself. If you want to drink, you're going to suffer in later life. You want to smoke, you're going to suffer in later life. You want to stuff yourself full of food, you're going to suffer in later life. We are who we make ourselves. We can, as a collective of people, and we are a very good people in this country. We've got a few I'd like to kick out, but I'm not going to get into arguments over their philosophies because we're actually talking to some of them about their philosophy, so it's not a problem. My whole object in life is get somebody, no matter how much they dislike you or look down at you, you talk to them with respect and show them that you have nothing against them. You can start to change them to being a normal everyday person that we consider.
Yeah, well, once again, that just comes down to individual liberty, doesn't it, Wayne? So we can think, feel, behave, believe however we want. We shouldn't be pushing that onto others or onto other cultures, and we should respect that people have different ways of thinking and believing and philosophizing on life, essentially. All right, so now I want to get on to some really important information. So bear with me on this because I need to go through a couple of things, including what's going on in the Yellow Vest Australia movement, as well as the content of the pledge. So let me get through this as quick as possible. The Yellow Vest Australia movement, there's been some interesting developments arise. For starters, the Australian Liberty Alliance, which is a political party in Australia, has applied to change its name to Yellow Vest Australia Political Party. Obviously, that's upset a lot of people because the Aussie chapter are not left or right. We're not a policy platform. We're not a political party. We're a peaceful people's movement that isn't left or right, that wants to resolve the core issues of freedom and the design of our social system, essentially. So at the moment, I got a call from Debbie from the ALA. She advised me that A, she didn't know what was going on with the Australian Yellow Vest Alliance and what was happening in Australia, and B, that she applied for the name change about 4 or 5 weeks ago. I'm not sure how truthful that is. I did advise her that that we suggest that she repeal her decision. She declined that, and what can we do? That's their decision. The other aspects that are sort of concerning us in terms of the pledge, though, is that minor parties had some reservations about yellow vest branding because of how the media have been painting the yellow vest movement across the world in terms of it being violent and rioting and all those sorts of things. Now, of course, the French yellow vest movement are a peaceful people's movement. They just want a renationalisation of their government, so kick out the unelected bureaucrats of the EU and the UN. They also want a renationalisation of their money and banking supply, as we do here in Australia. I'll get to that in a moment. And they also want referendums initiated by the citizens. So essentially, just they want the power returned to them. Now, of course, they've got rogue groups within the French that are behaving antisocially and violently, but they've also been infiltrated. And so they've told us that there are allegations that government sort of funded groups have been burning these cars and creating this sort of mayhem so that they can paint them as a poor picture to the world. However, ultimately at their core, they are a peaceful people's movement, but that doesn't mean that public perception doesn't know that. And so the minor parties here in Australia, some of which were concerned about the YV branding. We had already decided to remove the YV branding because of that, because we're not about, it's not about yellow vests. It's about the Australian people coming together to resolve the issues in our system. And so what we've decided to do at the Australian Yellow Vest Alliance is create a separate entity, and that is called Revive Australia. So what we will do is create unification within the minor parties via them signing this pledge. Candidates and within the independent candidates and minor party candidates will sign this pledge. And that'll create unification, which will lead to education, because we'll start a national conversation essentially about these core issues that I'll go through in a moment about the pledge, and hopefully that'll catalyse real systemic change. So we've once again, Revive Australia movement is the new body that is going to be pushing and marketing this pledge. You can check us out at www.reviveaustraliamovement.info. Okay, so let's go through the content of the pledge. This is very simple. It is designed to return the power of the people. It is not a strict policy platform. It is more a facilitator of a conversation, of a focus within the 2019 election and how we move forward as a country. So the first part of it is returning the power to the people, empowering the people's voice, restoring true democracy. I spoke about the preferential voting, or I briefly mentioned it. Essentially, we want to abolish forced preferential voting. So this is the one-two punch of returning the power to the people. End forced preferential voting so that our vote stays with the candidate or candidates that we so choose. Instead of this trickle-down voting where our vote might end up with, and likely to end up with, a candidate we don't want it to, it'll stay with a candidate we so choose, just like they do it in the local elections. So we could just do optional preferential voting, or maybe first past the post, but this is an integral part of the conversation of returning the power to the people. The second punch, the 1-2 punch, is implementation of CIR, or citizen-initiated referendums. And we don't want multi-million-dollar messes. We just want them inexpensive, simple, and secured on the blockchain so it can't be scammed, as a voting app. So on your phone or your computer, people can just choose yes or no. Now, of course, there's some people who won't have access to that, so they can mail in if they want to vote. We're suggesting something like 3% of eligible voters to initiate a referendum. Again, we don't want millions of them. We just want parliamentarians who are going to be enacting our will anyway in the government. But if we don't have that, if we've got politicians that are lying or working in the interests of big money, then we should have the power to sack them via CIR. We also should have the power to design our social system how we so choose. So the 1-2 punch of bringing the power back to the people is ensuring our vote stays with candidates we want it to, as well as having citizen-initiated referendums that are actually managed in a way where all of the evidence is laid out by independent bodies and broadcast via the mainstream media, so the public are informed before they vote. We need fully informed votes for CIR, and to make sure that we circumnavigate any propaganda for basically propagandizing the public on which way to vote. So we want them to be informed. The conscience and the common sense of Australians is there. We believe in Australians to make the right choice with everything, of course we do, but we just need to make sure the right information is getting out. Now, the next part of it is respecting the Constitution, everything we're talking about here, including in officially recognising a Bill of Rights in that Constitution. So that could be the 1688 version, or it could be a modern version, whatever. We just need to make sure that our individual right to have supreme authority over ourselves, while still being accountable for the golden rule, do unto others as they do unto you, or do no harm unless in self-defense. Really important stuff, so that all legislation, judiciary, courts, parliamentarians are designing their legislation and acting in accordance with our individual liberty. Very, very important. The next part is reinstituting a people's bank. So we more or less want to go back to something like the Commonwealth Bank of Australia used to be. For those who don't understand it, money is created out of nothing. Right? So mortgages, credit card debt, that is new money that did not come from an account somewhere else. It was created out of nothing, and then you pay that money back. It's re-wiped from the system, but guess who gets to keep the profits, i.e. the interest of that money creation process? That's right, private stakeholders, private shareholders, and of course the international banking cartels. The big four in Australia, for those who don't know, are half foreign owned. So most of the money that is generated from this money creation process goes overseas. So instead of that, why don't we just go back to how we used to do it, where the money creation process, the profits from it, was reinvested back into our communities. We could do that through local banks as well, to compete with private commercial banks, so that we keep them honest, but also money that's created out of this process can go into health services, mental health services, infrastructure projects. Basically, we could green the desert, or build pipelines to green certain areas of our sort of western, sort of drier areas within New South Wales and Queensland, but anywhere really. And also to basically organise our society in a way where we've got the funds to support our needs, because there's so many people whinging about not having enough money, like, oh, we've got such a budget deficit, or we need to get the surplus. All that's just a scam. We can just go back to the old system where, like Denison Miller used to run the Commonwealth Bank of Australia between 1910 and mid 1920s, where he funded infrastructure projects, huge expansion of Australia, funded World War One, and more or less said that he could have done that 10 times over with the way that he was operating that bank. So there are ways in which we can create abundance on a community scale and protect ourselves, preserve our commonwealth, and we need to really consider that. That's a really big issue for how we move forward. The next step is revitalise local economies. So first we need to create widespread local and regional food and resource systems that will safeguard us or insulate us from national or financial shocks, national or global financial shocks, meltdowns, hiccups, whatever. If we're creating most of our food and our resources on local regional scales, then we are completely protected, but we're also creating more education for kids and adults in terms of what healthy food is, how to create your own resources. I mean, for starters, we need polycultural food systems. The model of industrial agriculture has been forced on our farmers because they had to, otherwise they couldn't compete. But that's a monocultural process where it actually has extreme damage to our environment. It kills the life in the soil. It basically creates nutrition-less food because there's no life in the soil converting the minerals and nutrients into forms that the plant can suck it up. And you've got all these toxic sprays and injection of chemicals, synthetic chemicals, into the soil. So that model needs to shift to polyculture, which permaculture is an example of. So essentially you're working in symbiosis with your land, creating all your food and resource needs in a way that's good for you and good for the environment. That's pretty simple. We also need to reincorporate hemp back into our model. Hemp can, for those who don't understand it, whinging about all these, oil-based plastics, Hemp can create biodegradable plastics, right? It can create a biofuel that's healthy for the environment. It can create ropes, soaps, concrete or hempcrete it's called, building materials, carpets, medicine, you name it. Hundreds upon hundreds of products we could create locally. Imagine what through hemp, and imagine what that would do for our local economies. It would stimulate that, more jobs, and it would get more people involved and educated and learning health and life skills. So that is so important for how we move forward. The next aspect is returning our public assets, which is a really big one for many people. So what we need to do is restitute our publicly owned essential infrastructure so it's affordable for Australians. That is so important because with our ports, our water licenses, our power, our banks, our farms, Australian lands, Australian hands, minerals, mines, all this sort of stuff has been sold off. We need to bring that back to the public. That is really important. We need to protect our farmers. We need to protect our food and resource systems. We've got a lot of work to do there. The final part is removing corruption. So these political donations and bribery by corporations, multinationals, essentially what we have right now is big money controlling macro policy. That's why so many people are frustrated with the two-party system, because it's been turned into a two-party tyranny. So it doesn't matter if you vote left or right, they're going to institute the same big policy because they're controlled by the same people. So that and the lobbying industry needs full investigation. That's a very toxic industry. That there's lots of under the table deals, and look, it is an absolute mess that we need to sort out instantly, as well as this political puppetry stuff. Having Malcolm Turnbull, an ex-managing director of Goldman Sachs, as the foreman of our country, i.e. the Prime Minister, was one of the biggest conflicts of interest our country could have ever had. We need to make sure we've got great Aussies who represent community needs, not banking needs, which we know the banking industry is a very toxic and has been shown as criminal on many levels as well. And on that note, Larissa Waters from the Greens, she wants a lot of this anti-corruption. She's got an anti-corruption bill that she's trying to push. Let's see if she'll sign this pledge, because ultimately, if she really wants to work in this on the side of the Australian people, she will sign this pledge. She will help more people understand what the real focus that needs to be within Australia, and it's going to be very interesting to see how she responds. So we'll make sure she gets it. You guys can also send it. At home, you can send this to her as well to make sure that she's very clear about the reality, the existence of this pledge. Okay, so thanks for sticking by me. Again, it's not sticking with me for that. Very important core stuff that we need to focus on. Again, not strict policy, just to generate a conversation about it, generate education. We've got an addendum to it to explain it a little bit more, elaborate on it. But ultimately, Wayne, what do you think? Do you think this is a good strategy? Will it work? Do you support it? Let me know your thoughts. I'd really appreciate that for myself and the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. The reason I did actually say I wasn't interested in removing the 1688 Bill of Rights is not because I think it can't be improved. It can, as long as we don't fiddle with it too much. But when you swear your oath of allegiance to the Queen, which is, or to the Crown actually, that is what brings in all these acts into play, like Magna Carta, habeas corpus. If you look through all of those and form a Bill of Rights out of those that comply with those, you can actually keep those acts and have your own Bill of Rights. And there is a couple areas need updating in there, and we can discuss that later, at a later date, because the idea of removing the 1688 Bill of Rights and putting another one in place, 9/10 of the 1688 Bill of Rights would go back. There's a couple little places that refer to ancient customs which you would remove because they don't apply today. But basically, the 1688 Bill of Rights. See, all those laws apply in this country subject to our Constitution. Now, a lot of the things that need changing, we already have them in our Constitution. We need to go back to them, like protecting our industries. That's in your like your customs and excise laws. That's how you control it. But when the government got hold of it and they upped the tax on all of our infrastructure, like cars, for instance, and then allowed these cars to come into the country and tax them, what they did is they lifted our cars so they were too high, and the others were an alternative. So people bought those alternatives and dumped our cars. Look at the Ford V8 351 Cleveland, or the Cleveland motor itself. Yanks come here and buy those motors because they're a better motor than them, and it's the same design as them. Why? Because we are technology advanced in this country, far superior than a lot of countries, because we put engineering excellence into everything we do. We over-engineer things, meaning they're better. Our planes, like Qantas and that, have the best flight record in the world. Why? Because our standards are better. We have the ability to do anything the rest of the world can do, just that little bit better, because in sport, we excel just a bit better. In everything we do in Australia, we excel a bit better. Our soldiers excel a bit better. We've got that drive. We've got the technology. We've got a constitution. And as you said, we need to pull it all together under your charter and get it correct, go forth and get our kids learning, not learning about, how to hold a baby and all that. That's a parent's job. It's a parent's job to teach sex education to kids. Go back to school where you learn ABC, all your numbers and everything else. Put into schools books. Like when I was at school, I read books on popular engineering, popular mechanics, and all the encyclopedias about the world I could find, all the classics in comic form. Put all that back into our school. Put it where the kids can get it. National Geographic is a beautiful place to show you all over the world what every country's doing. Why aren't we doing it? Because, as I say, we need to get this education back. We need to get it where we're educating our kids in common everyday life. The rest of it, some of the best brains in the world come from here.
You're speaking my language here, Wayne. This issue is very close to my heart. I've worked with many kids over the years, and the despair and the lack of self-discovery that they're in. It's really sad. Walking away with school from school with such a lack of health and life skills. Don't know how to be truly creative. They don't know how to really take care of themselves at all. That's why revitalising our local economies through localised and regionalised food and resource systems can help not just kids but adults too. Learn how to grow some food, learn what healthy food is, learn how to create stuff for themselves, and learn how to connect with community. So very important stuff. Now, just moving on to the vote of no confidence or informal voting stuff, they have been informed that this strategy won't work. Informal votes aren't counted, so 49% of the, just say if they did get 51% of the people they require to sack all the parliamentarians, the 49% vote will still be used to determine who wins. That will be the outcome. And not only that, the likelihood of them getting 51% of the population to do this is so low. It's ridiculous. So I just don't understand why they keep pushing this when they know it's not going to work. I know they're taking the moral high ground, but it just seems so strange that they will continue to push something that is inherently that has been proved to not be able to work.
And they know it. They know it.
What, you think they're controlled opposition or something? Or they're paid trolls? What is going on?
The reason I filed in the House of Lords is because the company known as the Government of Australia, or the Australian government, has stolen one of Her Majesty's realms, being the Commonwealth of Australia. So I seized it all under Clause 51 of Magna Carta, because I can see the drama that is caused by you, by what you're saying, not by you, sorry. So I seized this constitution, hold it as suspended in fraud, along with every single law passed by the political parties, and hold it suspended in fraud. And on the 8th of January, I served it on the Prime Minister, give him an after Christmas present. And they understood, because it shook up the whole Parliament. They wanted to know what I was doing and why I was doing it. I said, because you are going to come back under our Constitution. We as a people, and you said it, you're not going to get them all to rise up. We as a people need to understand 1, 2, 3, 4 or 5 or 10 or 15 people can make a difference if they use the laws we've actually got. People don't understand your authority under Clause 61 of Magna Carta. the majority of police officers don't understand if they've sworn the lawful oath to the Queen, they have ultimate authority. You can relay something to a politician or a magistrate. You can tell him, this is the law, abide by it. And when he doesn't, you can actually arrest him. In fact, the one that I was in front of thought we were going to arrest him. And I said, no, that's not what I'm intending to do. I'm intending to put the law to you, and you're going to abide by it, whether you like it or not. Little bit arrogant, maybe, little bit get in your face, but accurate according to law. I respected him. He respected me. Even though he didn't like it, he started to shake a bit when I told him he's going to jail for the rest of his life. But that's a fact of law. I wanted to rattle him to get up and leave the court and concede he had no right to be there. My job that I've taken on, self-appointed job, by the way, is to get in their face, put the law to them. Yeah, I've been kicked out. Yeah, they declared me vexatious for the purpose of shutting me up. They tried to get me for contempt of court 2 years after the case, mind you. And I said to him, well, if this nice lady, associate to the judge, was so upset the way I spoke to her boss, why did it take her 6 months to get the transcript, another 6 months to make the complaint? And these clowns, being the state solicitor, 12 months to bring it here. And I said, then when you look at the senior judge there, Justice Pawn, he hasn't sworn the oath of allegiance to the Queen, but he is a very precise person in law. He gets it wrong quite a bit. He's retired now. But I said, if I said those things in front of him, he would have locked me up. Not next week, instantly, because he is precise. So it got thrown out. But that was to try and scare me. I don't scare. I'm not scared of anybody. Like I stood up in the Kalgoorlie court and basically told the judge, listen, I'm a friend of the court. You have no right to threaten that guy and make him have a lawyer. And he just glared at me. I didn't tell you I could talk. I said, I don't need you to tell me to talk. I'm an officer of the Crown. I'm telling you, you cannot tell him to have a lawyer. And he's, after a minute, he said, well, I suggest, I stood up and said, excuse me, you can't. You can say, there's a lawyer, there's you choose who represents you. That's not bias. Anything else is bias. He didn't like that, but in the end he says, well, that's how it is. He agreed. People need to know their rights, need to know they can stand up in a court in a gallery and say, excuse me, as a friend of the court, that's wrong. But to do it, you have to know it. I learnt it in the police force. I know the limitations of what you can and can't say. I've been trying to instill that in people's heads because this is an asset. You go up on a drink driving charge and they say, you blew so-and-so and so-and-so. What do you got to say to the charge? I'm sorry, I haven't been charged. You're alleging I was driving over the limit. When all that evidence is put to the court that says I was, that then and only then can I say, whether I'm honest or not doesn't matter. I have the right to plead not guilty or guilty if I like. If they put a pack of lies there, you say, no, not guilty. If they put the truth, you look at it and say, yeah, that's exactly right. All right, I'll cop it sweet. You're not charged with anything when you go to court. There's an allegation you did something. And people have to learn until the police or whoever put all that evidence before a court, there's no charge. What are you pleading to? He could say, Father Christian kicked you in the backside. You go along there and you plead not guilty to it. He didn't do it. And then they put all the evidence later, had nothing to do with what happened. And you say, oh, hang on, none of that happened. Why the hell would you plead guilty or not guilty to it? You don't know what they're putting. It's like saying, well, it is exactly saying an allegation becomes a charge. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. If they allege you were speeding, prove it. The onus of proof is on them. What they do after the 1999 referendum, reversed it. You got to prove you didn't. And even when you can prove it, like I use Pythagoras' theorem, position of the camera in relation to the road and the distance and the angle across, I proved to the magistrate with mathematics it was 100% correct. He sat there for a full 10 minutes and he said, you are correct. The reading is wrong. It's wrong to the degree you said, right down to the kilometres an hour. But he said section 96 of the Road Traffic Act says that speed reading device is deemed to be prima facie evidence of a case and can't be disputed. I said, that law is wrong. Takes away the judicial function in this court. He said, I agree, but I convict you, but he only gave me the minimum fine. Then the policewoman jumped up and started screaming. He told her where to get off and get out of the court. He said, these things have to be corrected. You know yourself. You know Pythagoras' theorem, 3, 4, 5 method of finding a right angle. The last 3 meters you travel, if the camera's 4 meters off the road, it's saying you traveled 5 meters, 20% accuracy. The binary contained in a computer is for a set position. If your car's riding up and down over bumps and you're moving side to side on the road, what have you got? An inaccurate speed. Law is precise. Either you're doing 50 k's an hour in a 40 zone or you're doing 43 k's in a 40 zone. But then when you look at the federal law, it has 60 k's an hour, 68 before they can book you, 70, 79, and so on, 110, 123. Why isn't it adhered to? Money. They say if you're not speeding, you won't get caught. Hang on, what about if your speedo is wrong? What about if you put too much air in your tyres, changes the diameter, increases your speed? You have no idea. That's what it's there for. The law needs to be applied liberally with the space. I've been caught coming back from Perth, 120, 123 k's an hour. 9, 10 o'clock at night, you get pulled over, slow down, blowing this, yeah, fine, go. Keep it down a bit, fine. No one minds, but when you're around town, the speed limit's there for a reason, safety. So you do it. To apply it any other way, I mean, you get out on the country road, they're complaining now people are going to sleep. If you increase the speed limit to 120 or 130 k's an hour, you'd go from a luxury drive sitting there in La La Land with automatic air conditioning and all your sweet music to having to drive again. You would drive precisely. What's wrong? Our cars are built wrong. They're not built to keep you awake. These are all things we need to address in our system. So it doesn't just pertain to the law. It pertains to cars. It pertains to your house. It pertains to everything. We have to systematically go back as a nation, correct all the problems, and we can fix about 80% of it. There's about 20 you'll never fix because you always got the people that say, I'm just not doing it. And they're the ones that are hard. But if 80% do it, that 20% have to fall in line and go find somewhere else to live. That's fine.
You've hit the bloody nail on the head again, Wayne. Police need to realise that when applying the law, which some law goes against individual sovereignty anyway, right? So it's not really law. It needs to be chucked out. However, it needs to be applied liberally because the law, reality doesn't work black and white. It's a grey area. And don't get me wrong, I've met many police, especially in rural community areas, who are, quite intelligent with their application of the law, and they don't come in with a big stick, and they're not here about respect my authority. They're just like, trying to do a community service, and they're great. We need those people within the system. I used to work in the system myself. For 10 years, I was with the federal government doing policy development and project management, so about 3 or 4 years, and then I went to the state government for about 6 or so years, working social work type stuff, so working with socioeconomically disadvantaged kids, adults, and family units. I really enjoyed it, challenging but rewarding stuff. It was very difficult in many cases, just in terms of the culture of the organisation I was working with. I got a lot of respect from my clients from my clients because I didn't go in there with the big stick and respect my authority. It was like, I'm there to help. I'm there to help. I'm there to help nurture and work with you guys to actually create safe and happy households and whatnot, and to heal and to grow and do all the stuff they need to do. So I treated them with respect. However, I was always standing up for my ethics and the right path, the path that was right, and even the path that was aligned to macro policy. And that went against some cultural toxicity within the organisation. Don't get me wrong, many great people working there, but people who are very sick themselves and indoctrinated into poor philosophy and practice as well. And so that's really, really important that we do consider the way that we do apply law, regardless of what organisation we work for, in a way that is intelligent and uses a bit of wisdom, like what is going to be the best approach to get the best outcome, not am I following like a robot the law sort of thing. I guess we've got to be smart as we move forward. So, yeah, just a quick mention now on the pledge. Go to the website www.reviveaustraliamovement.info. Reviveaustraliamovement.info. That pledge, what we need to do, we've got about 50 out of the 151 electorates organised in terms of people on the ground. I think I mentioned that before, but we don't need millions of people to make this work. Essentially, we need people to deliver it online and in person. We need people to go hand out flyers. We need people to go to the booths on election day, hand out flyers, and be scrutineers. And we just really need to get a good ground team of people to start holding accountable the candidates, not just the politicians, but the candidates who are actually applying to be part of this governmental system. So, what do you reckon, Wayne? Good strategy? Can this work? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah, I do. Um, I'm going to do a video on voting and try and convince people to understand there's no such thing as Australian Electoral Commission. It's unlawful. We need to have where the state governors run all the elections, whereas then you pick the people that represent you and your state, and we need that. And that collective will fit in exactly with your strategy. Um, so I'm going to do it. I need to do one on the condition of your title deeds to your land, because that's in a shocking mess and it's got to be corrected. People are working all their lives and their land's not theirs. It belongs to the government. Nonsense. You pay for it, you own it, you got it. And the government's not sovereign, so it can't own anything. But getting back to what you planned, yeah, we need to get people there. We need to teach people, even the current politicians. Listen, you want to sit in our parliament? This is a good strategy. Look at it. Understand it. This is not for you. This is for your family. This is for your future family. And all the relatives and friends you got. This is for them. This is to get rid of the nonsense and put us in a place where, like you say, we can live a normal, happy life, not interfere with anybody else. We don't need to go out and bash somebody to get fun or steal something to have fun or get drunk. That's all nonsense. Want to drink? Go home. Want to have fun? Go and have some, not at the expense of other people. So I agree with your strategy. Yep. I don't know what I could do to put it out there because I'm waiting to go to England. That could be any day, and I don't know when I'll be back. Probably not for 3 or 4 weeks. I can't control that, but I've got a job to do there. It has to be done to put our constitution back, to put our country back where it belongs, and that's what I'm doing.
Well,
So
that's
yeah, I agree with your stuff. It'll be good.
fantastic. Well, I would love to interview Rod Carlton as well. I'm speaking to one of his team about that. Hopefully, you can put in a good word for me, Wayne, because it'd be great to have an interview with him about what's
I
going
talk to him all
on.
the time. I talk to him all the time. I'll have a word with him. We
Excellent,
chuck
excellent.
his team and I chuck stuff backwards and forwards because we both help each other. Not a problem. I'll
Awesome.
talk to him.
Because we
Yep,
really need this information to get out to more people. Or there's so many
absolutely.
good Australians doing their different stuff, and even minor parties. There's a lot of minor parties who have done some amazing stuff, put a real good policy platform together, and that's what we're trying to unite. We want to identify which minor party candidates and independents who actually want to deal with the issues that yourself and myself and all these people who are concerned about the direction our country is heading. We need to unite, we need to educate, and we need to catalyse real systemic change. All right, I think that's pretty close to the end there, Wayne. Is there anything that we missed that you want to quickly cover? And I really hope that we can do this again sometime.
We can do it anytime. I'm pretty well covered. I've got to go. I've got a couple of taps to fit for my daughter's house.
Okay, well, you enjoy that, Wayne. What a fabulous chat. Very educational, not just for those watching, but myself too. I mean, my eyes glazed over many times when you're talking about certain aspects of the Constitution. I've got a lot of learning to do myself, as do we all. But it is so important information. And the way that you wrapped it up with focusing on caring for each other and behaving in better ways. Fantastic. It was something I wasn't expecting. So I really appreciate that because that speaks dearly to a lot of the work that I do. Thank you so much, Wayne. An absolute pleasure. And yeah, really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I see I've not only had to learn, I've actually lived what I do, because when you live it, it becomes more real and it's easier to remember. And when you're talking to someone, it just pours out of your mind into their face so you can help them. And that's what I'm about, helping people. This is not about me saying, because people say, oh, you're a hero. I'm not anyone's hero. I'm not nothing. I'm just me. I come from the bottom end of the food chain. I worked my guts out. I got what I got through hard work. I love Australia. I love its people. I don't give a hang if you're black, white, or brindle. You are the same cut. You go and get a knife and cut them. They're all the same. I've seen plenty of them smashed up. They're all the same inside. Stop the nonsense. Live together. Let's have some fun. Make love, not war. It's a good idea, even though I
That's
don't like hippies.
oh, come on, Wayne. I'm a hippie at heart. Don't be so rough on us. But yeah, no, you're spot on. You know, like we need to come together as a team, realize we're on the
Yeah,
same team, and move forward together, and start having a
yeah,
better attitude. And one of my favorite philosophies, one of my deepest philosophies, is to be both playful and serious at the same time. So I like how you summed it up with having a bit of fun.
yeah. Well, that's how you got to be. Anyway, you
Awesome.
have a very good day.
I will. You too, Wayne. Thank you very much.
Not a problem at all.